Okay, this is part 7 of Quotes from Ayn Rand. First, a comment by Stefan Molyneux. He said, Atlas Shrugged is the second most influential American book after the Bible. Now, that's a controversial statement. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a magnificent book. It basically shows you that collectivism is a joke. Okay, but there's been other magnificent books that have had a lot of influence on American society. Of course, Ben-Hur was big stuff back in its time, and then Gone with the Wind was a big movie in its time. Da Vinci Code was a big movie in recent times. And book. Okay. She was very stuck up, rightfully so. She's the most influential female philosopher who ever lived. She said, if anyone can pick a flaw in my philosophy, I will be happy to acknowledge him and learn something from him. Until then, I am the most creative person alive. The two men who influenced her the most were Aristotle and Victor Hugo. She said the greatest novelists are Victor Hugo and Fyodor Dostoevsky. And again, it's kind of funny because they're both intensely Christian writers. Here's Ayn Rand's comment on Hugo. Discovering Victor Hugo was the greatest literary experience I ever had. The sense of life he communicated, the grandeur of men was so high above anything I had ever encountered in any other books. To this day, I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Victor Hugo. It is from him I learned the art of the romantic novel. The novels of Victor Hugo and a very few others were an unrepeatable experience to me, a beacon whose every brilliant spark is alive as ever. Okay, the 1985 soundtrack, by the way, for Les Mis is like the best musical soundtrack ever made. It's right up there, like with Messiah by Handel. And I loved reading Les Mis. I read it in a couple different languages, English, Spanish, and French. On a whim, I read Hunchback of Notre Dame, and it started out slow. I was almost ready to give up on it. But then, I loved Esmeralda, the gypsy girl. She was the way she was written was perfect. And the scene where she reunited with her mother was so emotional, like reminded me of my own mother. Anyways, that's a magnificent book, Notre Dame, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Takes a while to get going, but it's great. Okay, Ayn Rand, she alienated a lot of people when she wrote about the virtue of selfishness. I think she should have called it self-centeredness instead of selfishness. She basically said individual has the right to live for themselves as long as they don't, impinge on others, and that's a reasonable statement. She should have contrasted it against collectivism instead of using the word altruism, I think, and it would have resonated more with people. Okay, a couple good quotes of Ayn Rand on thinking. She said there are two different methods of learning, by memorizing and by understanding. And she basically said, the way you teach a human is to teach them to understand things. And she said the way the schools teach is by memorization, which is how you teach an animal. She wasn't impressed by the public schools. Ayn Rand, she says to understand means to isolate the essentials, to establish relationship to the previously known, and to integrate with the appropriate category of other subjects. Psychologically, the choice to think or not is the choice to focus or not. Existentially, the choice to focus or not is the choice to be conscious or not. And metaphysically, the choice to be conscious or not is the choice of life or death. You want to just go with the herd, or do you want to have your own brain? Okay, Ayn Rand continues. A concept is a mental integration of two or more units possessing a distinguishing characteristic into a single new mental entity. The element of similarity is crucially involved, but the same characteristic, but in a different way. Okay, here's a good one. Proper names are like a genus and species in reversed order. For example, John Smith, where Smith serves as the genus and John as the species. All thinking is a process of identification and integration. Man can survive only by gaining knowledge, and reason is his only means to gain it. Reason is the faculty that perceives, identifies, and integrates the material provided by the senses. If you think there is a contradiction, then recheck your premises. Contradictions do not exist. Whenever you think you are facing a contradiction, check your premises. You will find that one of them is wrong. I found that really helpful to me, it helped me to understand things once I realized. Reassess your assumptions, because that's a lot of time where the problem is. Because we're good at logic, but we often have mistaken assumptions. Ayn Rand, the hardest thing to explain is the glaringly obvious, which everyone has decided not to see. Yeah, people aren't going to talk about something if it socially could get you in trouble or make you ostracized. So there's a lot of stuff that's obviously true, but people are hesitant to speak about it. For example, the public school says they're providing gender-affirming surgery for kids. No, they're castrating kids, okay? Say the truth. People find that awkward to say because they don't want to contradict the authority. Well, the authority might be a scumbag, okay, who's castrating children, all right? You know, there was some lady recently, I forget where it was, but she was talking and she said that in retrospect, she felt bad that she had been involved in encouraging 1,500 children to undergo transsexual surgery. And she says she now thinks it wasn't the right thing. Yeah, 1,500 kids have been castrated, okay? You know, it's insane. Gender-affirming surgery, and then they don't even want the parents to be involved in the consent? That's insane. That's insane. There is no historical precedent for this. Okay, you can just make up a euphemism for anything. Gender-affirming surgery. You know, castrating a kid. Okay, Ayn Rand. Intelligence is man's most precious attribute. Okay, she says, the thinking man who is educated, intelligent, and hardworking is the motor of the world. To improve anything, one must know what constitutes an improvement. And to know that, one must know what is the good and how to achieve it. And to know that, one must have a whole system of value judgments, a system of ethics. Okay, that's it for Ayn Rand quotes today. Hope you found that helpful.